Welcome into the latest episode of the 5 Reasons Podcast. I'm Ethan Skolnick here, as always, with Chris Winningham. Now that you found us, make sure you hit the subscribe or follow button on your favorite podcast provider. That way you get all of our old episodes as well as all of our new episodes as soon as they post. Also type in 5 Reasons Sports. You'll get the other 14 podcasts in our network. Of course, includes 3 Yards Per Carry, 5 Rings Canes, which is actually our fastest growing podcast right now, Miami Heat Beat, Swings and Mishes as Marlins season has officially started, and all the others. And of course, check out our website, 5reasonsports.com. That's spelled out. It's not like the Twitter handle. It's spelled out F-I-V-E, reasonsports.com. We have at least 2 new columns up there every day. All of our podcasts for Apple and for Android, and also the latest breaking news in South Florida sports, as well as summaries of some of our episodes. All right, today we're going to get into the Heat, because I don't know how much longer the Heat are going to be around to get into. I was at the game. As we're speaking right now, this is a Thursday night. I was at the game on Wednesday night, and as I'm at that game, I'm just sort of realizing the finality of this, which is you and I have been talking all year long about worst possible outcome for this team, right? This is a team, as I wrote today in a column for 5reasonsports.com, that has been half-stepping all season. They've got 1 foot in the present, 1 foot in the past. They've got 1 foot in terms of making Justice Winslow their point guard, and 1 foot in still Goran Dragic. 1 foot playing the contracts, 1 foot playing the kids. I mean, they've been all over the place this whole year, to the point, as we've talked about, that Kelly Olynyk had 3 DNPs in January, a month that they really could have used him, that they traded Ellington basically to get rid of Tyler Johnson's money for cap and mostly for tax purposes. So it's like they've been trying to make the playoffs but not putting everything into it. And now here we are with 4 games left, a team that has not won more than 4 games at any time this season except once, when they had a 5-game winning streak towards the end of December, right before Christmas. And really, to make the playoffs, Chris, they have to go 3-1. I think they might need to go 4-0 if you look at some of the way that the tiebreakers break. And I don't know how this team, as inconsistent as it is, with us taping as we found out that Josh Richardson is out for at least the rest of the regular season, with Justice Winslow looking as rusty as he did last night, how is this team going to make the playoffs now?
Yeah, I mean, really, it would come down to the Toronto Raptors and the Philadelphia 76ers not playing hard, which is certainly possible. Philadelphia right now, they're actually not playing particularly well at the moment. They've lost 2 in a row, and they're way off of Toronto in second, and they're 2.5 clear of Boston and Indiana in 4th and 5th. And so I don't know how hard they're going to be trying. And they also play Toronto, who are pretty firmly solidified into that second spot. So it really comes down to a lack of effort from those teams, and then winning on the road in Minnesota, which I don't think is a guarantee. I mean, Minnesota probably incentivized to tank right now. They're not going to make the playoffs, but Karl Anthony Towns is playing incredibly right now. Karl Anthony Towns will be by a mile the best player on the floor in that game, and then it comes down to that Brooklyn game at the end. So it's going to come down to beating teams that aren't trying to use that home lift of that 76ers game. But as we saw in the Chris Bosh retirement ceremony situation, it could also work against Miami, that emotional lift of a big evening at American Airlines Arena, a place that Miami has been among the worst home teams in the league at the moment, currently sitting under 500 at 18-22 at American Airlines Arena. They're above 500 on the road, which makes them, I think, only one of 3 Eastern Conference teams that's above 500 on the road. But they're not good enough at home to sort of guarantee that you'll win those games. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with you that they're in dire straits right now. The only thing that's given them any hope for me right now is the rest of the conference is in dire straits, too. I mean, Orlando, they're winning a bunch of games right now, but, I mean, I was watching some of the highlights of their game against New York. I'm not impressed. I mean, Michael Carter-Williams is playing big minutes for them. I mean, Orlando can lose to anybody. Brooklyn is playing in the middle of a really tough schedule as well. They still have to play Milwaukee, Indiana, and then Miami on the final day. So it can really come down to a race to the bottom, which is not a ringing endorsement of what the Heat are doing, but that's their hope. Their hope is that the other teams around them will lose too, and maybe, as you said, 3-1 in these final 4 games will be good enough.
Yeah, and there's just nothing you can hang your hat on right now. That's the problem. I think for a little bit of time there
was... Well, it's Wade. I mean, Wade's the only thing that you can hang your hat on, not only in terms of the story, but in terms of the performances.
And I can't believe that's where we're at, right? Yeah. So you have a situation where Dwyane doesn't shoot at the end of the 4th quarter, and I know our John Color Navas wrote about this for the site, and it's like, oh God, Dwyane let us down there. And it's like, why are they still relying on 37-year-old Dwyane Wade, in game 78 of a season to make the playoffs? Like, I mean, let's go back. I mean, it's been 9 years since he asked for help in Boston, and he got it, right? LeBron and Bosh. They're not coming around this time. And so it's just like you're looking at him for the answers. Now, it looks like they rushed Justice back. I know he said he felt pretty healthy last night. He did not look good, though. He didn't look comfortable. He wasn't aggressive. He was definitely rusty. I actually thought Josh in his return looked better than Justice, which is why it's a shame that Josh isn't going to be in there. And look, they missed two-thirds, their perimeters last night, that includes Wade, missed two-thirds of their shots. The only reason they were in that game was because they basically got like Wilt Chamberlain-like performances from their sort of three-headed monster at center. Bam, I thought, played exceptionally well, and Whiteside, in my view, played his best 20 minutes of the season.
Incredible. So, absolutely dominant in that late third, early fourth stretch.
That was pre-contract Whiteside. That looked to me like the Whiteside that was coming off the bench in Dallas and wrecking things, or in Chicago.
That's the guy you give a max contract to, right?
Right.
That guy that was wrecking the game.
That's the guy who fooled them, right? And I don't know how much more you can get that, but he was totally engaged. And Bam does completely different things, as does Olynyk. They all do different things from each other, and all of them were great, but they were the only three players on the floor who were even slightly good last night. And I just don't know who you go to. I mean, look, Josh's role has kind of decreased as the season's gone on. But, I mean, Dwyane Wade's, what's happened here, to me, is worst-case scenario. And as I tweeted last night, it's worst-case scenario in terms of the way the team's playing, and it's worst-case scenario in terms of what the likely outcome of this is. And the worst-case scenario is that people got hurt, which forced them to count on Dwyane more.
Played 42 minutes last night. I'm like, my eyes are about to pop out of it. 42 minutes.
How many threes did he take? 13? Now he did make 5. He did make 5, which is a reasonable percentage. But if you look at the last 6 games, I think he's averaging 11 3-point attempts per game. This is what Eric Spoelstra wanted Wayne Ellington to do when he was in there. Meanwhile, Wayne Ellington's starting in Detroit and pumping out 3 or 4 threes a game now, which, again, look, you either want to make the playoffs or you don't, okay? The Heat all year have not picked a direction at all, okay? It happened by accident because Dragic got hurt, James Johnson was hurt, Dwyane was out for a while, and so by accident, okay, and then Whiteside missed time because of the paternity leave, and as a result of that, they got to the kids in the starting lineup, right? Like that's how this happened. Mm-hmm. It was not by plan, okay? I can't give them the credit for this. Their best run of the season came basically by accident, but they have not picked a direction, and I'm not going to blame that part on the rotation stuff. You can pin some of that on Spoelstra, but I'm not going to blame that part on Spoelstra.
Why not?
Because that's ownership and management. That is, they didn't know which direction they wanted to go this year. Look, they know as an organization they're not good at tanking. I've been told that repeatedly by various people in the organization. We're not good at it. We don't do it well, okay? It's not part of us. We don't really even know how to do it, okay? We can't do it as well as other teams do that are bad organizations and just know how to lose, right? It's not the Heat. So I understand that you didn't want to pick that direction. But if you're going to pick the other direction, then don't sit Kelly Olynyk for all of January, okay? Yeah. Don't dump Ellington when you could have used it. Look, Wayne Ellington would be playing heavy minutes for them right now, right? Like, no Josh.
Yeah, Waiters can play 42 minutes, and Wayne Ellington could take a few of those.
Right. Okay. Tyler Johnson would have been playing right now.
Yeah.
So
and you're not getting anything out of Ryan Anderson, which not to pat myself on the back, but I got into a brief argument on Twitter when that trade happened. Oh no, I think he'll be a ninth man. I think Ryan Anderson's done. He's done, and you're right. I mean, Tyler Johnson, again, it's a bad use of resources, but $6 million in cap savings this summer is not going to mean anything towards making the playoffs right now.
It just keeps more money in ownership's pocket. Which I didn't kill him for it at the time. Because if you're not winning a championship and you're not winning a championship, then I'm not going to spend somebody else's money, all right? So I get it. It's not the same issue I had with the Mike Miller thing, which I knew would crater the locker room because of how popular he was, and they knew it, and they did it anyway. But as far as this one, look, we've been pushing for them to trade Tyler's money out. And the only way they could do it was to attach an asset. And the asset they attached was basically, dumping Ellington and getting nothing back for him. And even if they'd gotten something back, it probably would have been a second-round pick, which wouldn't have helped them right now anyway, and probably would have never helped them. All right, so I can justify some of it. But my larger point is that they have not sort of picked a direction. The direction this year was, let's paper this thing over for Dwyane and figure some of it out next summer. I mean, with Dwyane, not for Dwyane, with Dwyane, okay? And so Dwyane has sort of, he's been the roses on top of everything, right? Like
imagine if it had worked out in Cleveland and he was there, and I mean, maybe as a free agent he goes with LeBron to Los Angeles or figures out and that fence never gets mended, and I mean, without Dwyane Wade, this season is woof. My God.
Oh, yeah.
It is. And I say this as someone who, I get tagged as the Dwyane Wade hater, and he is by far, far and away the only saving grace of this season.
No, he is. I mean, again,
I've delivered
and
then some.
I said this on every pod. Like, you go to games and all of the marketing stuff is him. All of it.
Yeah.
All of it. They're going to have to pivot seriously this offseason. Like, they got to make it about the 3 kids if they're still here. 4 kids, I guess, if you throw DJJ in there. You're gonna have to do that, because what else are you selling? Like, I just have to think at this point, they're dreading what this is gonna look like next year, because it's been all about Dwyane. And we just did what I thought was one of our more fun episodes with Bob Metellus, his photographer and videographer, about everything that's gone into this and how Dwyane has embraced it. And you're right. If he hadn't embraced this, if he hadn't been back, I mean, he was 90% not to play this season, according to Bob and others close to him.
And Bob tells the story of Chris Paul getting off the phone with Dwyane Wade going, I think he's going to retire.
Right.
Yeah.
So what if that happens? What does this look like from a marketing standpoint? But as you said, he's the player of the team they're trusting right now. Like, you can't look. I don't know if you could have trusted Justice at this stage of his career and his development, even if he was healthy, but he's not healthy. And he didn't look to me last night like he's going to be all that healthy anytime soon.
And the other thing, so I was watching, I went back on YouTube. The NBA channel does a really good job putting together 9-10 minute videos of all the games. And I was watching the first Celtics Heat game, and Dwyane Wade had just made a layup at the other end of the floor, and I was trying to track back and see if I can find a fuller commentary of the whole broadcast. But the Celtics broadcasts are going, Dwyane Wade, or it's sort of out of context, right? They go, he's a little bit bigger than they might hope for. A lot bigger than they might hope for. I'm like, wait a second. Did someone tell the Celtics broadcast that, did someone in the Heat organization, really have a go at Dwyane Wade's shape, knowing that no one in Miami would hear this, and I'm, the only person watching the Celtics broadcast because it was on YouTube? It was a scathing criticism of Dwyane Wade and his physical condition, and he's promised he's going to come back next year. But, I mean, even from a culture stand, again, the things you're trying to sell, the direction you're trying to go in, if someone is that not into the culture, that they're just blatantly overweight playing NBA basketball, there have been no positive outcomes from the year other than the Dwyane Wade thing, which will be cool, and that Philly game will be fun, and that whole ambiance will be amazing for the fans, and it'll be a great night. But I mean, what do you leave the season with? And now, the other thing, too, that's starting to happen, and you got some pushback from the organization earlier in the year when you compared the Heat to the Dolphins, just in terms of results and in terms of what they've done. But this is their 3rd straight Dolphins season. I mean, the first one was the 41-41. It kind of reminds me of the year that they won the division, or even the year when, the suck for luck season when they started 0-7 and then finished 6-10, or even the Nick Saban year where, they started poorly and then Sage Rosenfels, I think, led them to or Gus Farrat led them to 6 straight wins. I forget which journeyman quarterback did it, but
Farrat they were 3-7.
And then Farrat won 6 straight, right? So that's that archetype of a Dolphin season. I mean, last year's maybe the first Adam Gase season, and this year is kind of every other Dolphin season, right in the periphery of 8-8 and making the playoffs. But it's 3 straight now, and as much as the Heat have the ultimate credibility from what they've done, from winning championships, from building the Big Three, and it's the same people, right? So it's the same people that built it. There will come an amount of time that can pass by without you doing anything that it starts to get concerning for the trust that the fan base has in the organization to turn it around. And I think if you asked right now the fans, do you trust that the organization can turn it around? Maybe you'll still get a majority that say yes, but that I imagine that approval rating is going down by the day. We'll get back to today's episode in a second, but first I want to tell you about one of our new sponsors here in the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and that is the attorneys at Seltzer Mayberg. Find them at onecalllegal.com. That's ONE calllegal.com, or actually call 855 5000 Law LAW. They handle cases including but not limited to car accidents, slip and falls, and any personal injury matters. Additionally, if you mention 5 Reasons, they will handle your traffic ticket for $44.99 with a new 15,000 square foot office opening on I-95 in North Miami. They will handle cases all over South Florida. Call now with 24/7 service for a free consultation. onecalllegal.com or 855 5000 Law. The attorneys at Seltzer Mayberg, a proud sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
that was kind of what Windhorst was getting with us, getting at with us on the pod was, that they've always been ahead of the game, always. And it just feels like they've come back to the pack in a bunch of different ways. They've, it's funny when you go back, I was looking at some old quotes from Riley about how, people were signing players to bad contracts and everybody would be wanting to dump those contracts. And who knew that the Heat was going to be lumped into that category, right? Like, it's just not what they do. And so they've put themselves here. I mean, look, you're paying this really stuck out to me in the Celtics game. So you don't have Richardson, right? And Winslow's not himself. And you're paying James Johnson $15 million a year. You got 2 more years of this after it, right? And Spoelstra, didn't have him in the initial 9-man rotation. He stuck him in there as a 10th guy a little bit later. And the lineup that, in my view, a lot of things cost them that game, okay? I mean, one thing is that the Celtics have better players, which, that's part of it.
There's that.
But the free throw shooting was atrocious. Obviously the Heat the perimeter players did not play well. But so a lot of things cost them that game. It wasn't one thing. But one of the things that cost them that game was Spoelstra threw out a lineup that had James Johnson and Justice Winslow out there together. And I just don't think you can ever do that. And they have all of these bad combinations, like playing Dion with Dwyane for extended minutes is ugly. And this is not a surprise. I said this in October. I'm like, you can't play the two of them together. The longer Dion stays out, the better, because, I want Dwyane to play, and you can't put the two of them out there on the court. Now, Dragic has chemistry with Waiters. We've seen that. Dragic's chemistry with Dwyane has improved, but Dwyane and Dion were never going to have chemistry. They had a couple flashes this season, and people threw it back in my face, and I'm like, no. Okay, it's not a fit. They know that. They're not. This is the whole thing about this organization, right? They're not like Sacramento for the past 10 years until the Kings have started to figure things out a little bit. They're not stupid. It's not like the Heat.
So then what's happened? Do they just have a redundancy?
No, they have redundancy, and look, but it's not like they look at this, okay? Or at least I don't think anybody but Pat does, maybe. Look at this and say, yeah, this is the team we want. We want a bunch of small guards that all do the same thing. We want duplication in the front court, okay? And like I said, Bam, Whiteside, and Olynyk are different type players, but you can't play Whiteside with either of the other two really effectively, right? They won't, Spoelstra got asked yesterday. I'll cycle back in a second to what I think went wrong here, and we've talked about it, but Spoelstra was asked yesterday about, Whiteside and Bam were his 2 best players against Boston. So did you consider playing them together? And he kind of dodged the answer, but the answer is he can't. They tried that a couple of years ago, or in Bam's rookie year, the year before this, and it was a disaster. If you look at the per 100 possession minute numbers, it was per 100 possessions, it was terrible. They can't play the two of them together until Bam develops, a perimeter shot. They can play Bam and Olynyk together, but they can't play the two of them. So they have all of these issues where they can't play certain guys
and then when they try and play 2 bigs together, they have to play zone against the Boston Celtics.
Well, that's the other thing.
And it got absolutely shredded.
Well, because they just put Horford in the middle of the zone,
and Tatum too. Tatum killed him. Killed him from the middle of the zone.
The fourth, and Spoelstra was saying after the game, we had a lot of good moments with it. And look, again, this. I ride with Spo, but no, they didn't.
Even the idea. Season on the line. You go with your best thing, your thing that you feel the best about going, and the thing that they felt best about in the final, quarter of the game, a massive game, is playing 2-3 zone. Again, you talk about a shortage of plans and ideas. That for me is stunning. The Heat organization have thrown their hands up on playing Heat defense and are playing a 2-3 zone that again and again and again, that space. And look, the math suggests that those are actually the shots you want to engineer. Al Horford and Jason Tatum at the elbow are the shots you want to engineer, but there comes a point where it's too open. It's too open, right. And they're gonna keep making them. And so again, it's that shortage of plan and ideas. And I was just stunned that again and again and again they were getting shredded in that zone of the floor while playing a 2-3 zone. That's Jim Boeheim. That's not the Heat. It's just, again, a shortage of a philosophy for the year of how they're going to approach the year. And they go down the stretch playing a 2-3 zone. And also to further prove your point about Wade and Waiters, third worst 2-man combo in the team this year at -76 Wade and Waiters in 38 games. Only ones worse were Kelly Olynyk and Tyler Johnson, which, okay, and James Johnson and Rodney Magruder. Those are the only lineups worse than Wade and Waiters together this year.
Okay, and a couple of things on that. One, I didn't even need to check the numbers. I haven't checked the numbers all year. I just know. Like
Yeah.
that's
You watch basketball.
right. You and Spo knows it. He knows it. Okay. The second one is you mentioned Magruder and James Johnson. How many minutes did they play together in the starting lineup before they finally tore that up? And one of the reasons that they played together so many minutes in the starting lineup is because they didn't want to give Kelly Olynyk his bonus, right? So that's part of it. If you look at the January where they were running Rodney out there for 30 something minutes a game, and James Johnson lugging himself back up and down the court, okay, with his team option behind, with his player option behind him, that's. No, okay. So you look at it now, and like I tweeted something yesterday that got a lot of circulation, which was the season wasn't lost. If the season was lost, it wasn't lost tonight. It was lost against Atlanta. It was lost against Orlando. It was lost against Phoenix, right? But in reality, the season was never entered by the Heat. Okay, like it was just never entered. Like again, it's half measures and half stepping. It's we're kind of trying, but we're kind of not. And hey, look at Dwyane. I mean, that's this year. Like that should be the slogan of the season. Hey, look at Dwyane. It's like the squirrel, right? Like there's Dwyane. And look, you know how I feel about Dwyane. You know how I feel about Dwyane personally. I have a lot of reasons to really admire Dwyane that had absolutely nothing to do with basketball. Okay, I've had a lot of situations in my life where Dwyane has reached out to me in situations where good friends of mine have not. Okay, so I have a personal affection for Dwyane and what he's done. Okay. Dwyane Wade to do a photo shoot, and I've told this story many times before, but after his rookie season, drives himself from Pinecrest down South Miami to the stadium, okay, on the border, of Broward and Dade, to sit there for an hour in the heat and wait on a photo shoot when Josh Beckett blew him off, okay, and then stayed so we could shoot the photos ourselves with him, okay, and we ended up hanging out with Juan Pierre in the batting cages. I mean, that's the Dwyane I know. The Dwyane I know is showing me texts of his son, when Dwyane was going through a rough period, okay, and his son encouraging him and all that. I have a million examples, okay. When I was sent up to Cleveland to cover LeBron and the Cavs, okay, and I was back for one day, and he called me over and said, "Let's do this interview now, so you get it done before you go." And he gave me 25 minutes. So I have a bias about Dwyane, okay? I readily admit it, okay? So I'm never going to bang on anybody for praising Dwyane. But let's just be honest about what's happened this season, is that, like you said, if it was not for Dwyane, they had nothing. And the only reason they've been able to get through without the fans going totally insane is because he decided to come back to play for a ludicrous figure. That's it. And I don't know what they do next year. And all I hope is that this summer, they figure it out, okay? What is our direction? Where are we going? Are we just going to be the Dolphins? And you're right. That's what they got angriest at me about, was that I compared them to the Dolphins. And look, they're not the Dolphins, okay, over the course of time. Okay, Riley's record is amazing. What is it? If they miss the playoffs, what is this, 6 times in his entire tenure? 5 or 6 times? Okay, I mean, they're going to struggle to get to 500, but you're talking about they've been over 500, I think, 80% of the time since he's been here. That's a remarkable record, okay? But over the past few years, they're not the Dolphins, but they're getting some Dolphin-like traits. And even the Dolphins don't want to be the Dolphins anymore.
No, but they are the Dolphins. I mean, the Dolphins are 7-9, 8-8, 9-7, and that's the Heat are the NBA equivalent of that. They're 7-9, 8-8, 9-7. This year's the 7-9 season. Last year was the 9-7 season, and the year before was the 8-8 season. Right? I mean, that's what it is. And I sometimes feel like I get defensive about the Dolphins because I still really love the Dolphins, even though I really should not, just as a customer, right? Just like if any business served up with the Dolphins have served up for 15 years, I'd be really upset about it. But I still love the Dolphins, and so I sometimes get defensive about this. But I mean, when Heat fans are you're making fun and all that, like, dude, your team's the Dolphins, like, and the Dolphins, but in cap hell, that you're gonna struggle to get out of, and people are but they're expiring next year, like. You still got a lot of money wrapped up in a team that stinks. Like Barry Jackson pointed out, it's like the 13th most expensive team in NBA history, and they might not make the playoffs. Like that is a travesty. And again, Dwyane Wade at $2.4 million that he's making is papering over all of it. And it's been fun, right? I mean, it is the only saving grace of the season. It's been fun, but man, I don't want to know what it looks like next year if they do nothing, which I have to expect at this point. I have to expect that they're doing nothing.
Yeah, I don't know what they do. I really don't. They do need to pivot to their young guys. I was having a conversation with some of the other media guys yesterday, and I think there's kind of universal agreement among the media that covers the team that the guy who has the chance to be something close to a centerpiece is Bam, but we're a long way from that, right? Like I see things on
what kind of centerpiece? I
don't know. I mean, is he Dwight? Is he Capella?
To me, the only offensive centerpiece that's a big right now is Karl Towns. And even then, it's hard to build around him because he can't defend. But I mean, Karl Towns is like miles away from Bam from a skill vantage point, and from like what. And even I guess Jokic is the same kind of thing too. I mean, Jokic is just such a dynamic playmaker that
he's a completely unique player.
Right, he's a completely unique player.
I mean, he's the bonus basically. Like he's Arvidas, like come back to life.
So the teams that have recently, have determined they're going to build around bigs. Now, one kind of abandoned it is Porzingis. Obviously, that's kind of gone. You can classify Giannis as a big man because he's basically Bam's size. Embiid, I guess maybe that's the best case scenario for me for Bam is Embiid. But Embiid showed it pretty early, right? I mean, I don't know if Bam is going to be able to get to that offensive level, particularly the drawing of the free throws. There was one possession last night that he had in transition. Was like, wow, that was impressively good ball handling. But to do that every time down the floor and have it be relied upon, I just don't know. I mean, Blake as well for Detroit is a different skill set. And then I mean, you look at Utah, kind of builds around Gobert, but that requires Mitchell. OKC has got Russell and George and Steven Adams, just a complimentary player. LaMarcus Aldridge, but I mean, I think Bam's got some steps to make before he gets even to Blake LaMarcus territory, much less Embiid, Jokic, and even Giannis territory.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's like I said, they have players to build with, but nobody to build around. Can Bam, Justice, and Josh be the second, third, and fourth best players on a really good team? I think it's possible, but you're still looking, and they're all young enough. That you can certainly make a case.
If you put them on Milwaukee as the second, third, and fourth best players with Giannis, that would be a damn good team.
Absolutely, right. But how many Giannis is there?
Yes,
and that's
correct.
the problem.
There's like seven of them.
Right, and so, I mean, they don't have anything resembling a Giannis or a Kawhi or a Curry or a Kyrie or a LeBron or, as you even said, a Towns or a Blake or any of that. I mean, we've done the numbers on this. Like, their best player, who I still don't know who it is it Wade? Is it Dragic? Is it Winslow? It kind of depends on the night, right? And their best player, though, would not be the best player on 27 other teams, 26. I mean, you and I have had this fight about Orlando since the very beginning of the season. Here we are, right? All those losses to Orlando have come back to haunt again. And the Magic, who I look at that roster, like you said, and I'm like, what the hell is on that roster? Right now, the money's on Orlando to finish ahead of the Heat with the way that their schedule looks the rest of the way and the fact that they have the tiebreaker. So, I don't. Would the Heat's best player be the best player on Orlando over Vucevic, over Aaron Gordon?
Vucevic has been exceptional. I was watching him. I mean, it's the Knicks, but I mean, he was dominant in that game, and he's, for me, the driving force in that team. Not watching a ton of Magic basketball, to be honest, but I mean, Vucevic has been. And I was even thinking, like, how would the Heat fans respond to Nikola Vucevic? I think they love Nikola Vucevic as a centerpiece player, just as much as they love Bam as not even a centerpiece player, but a really good player that's emerged for them this year. So. Again, those young players. Again, so we talk about salvaging graces and also them kind of falling haphazardly into the kids' plan. But I mean, it has helped at least engender some positivity amongst the diehards. I don't think your average Heat fan is really caring that much about Richardson and Bam and Winslow in a way where you actually think that they're going to lead you to the next step. But the diehards are drawing some hard for this. I do want to talk about something with you because I think another person you have a lot of time for is Eric Spoelstra. And I was watching the game, and I was watching them shred in the zone, and we're talking about things that. So you say that those come from management level, justifying the contracts and all that. But if we're talking about a team that returned everyone, that had the ability to play with continuity from the things that we liked about them 2 years ago, and yet has struggled to find any pattern over the course of 78 games, I think that falls on the coach. I think that falls on an inability to find the right combination of players, even if, again, we're saying that it's really difficult with this combination of players. But it's entirely the same. You don't have to change anything year over year, and yet they've changed everything along the way. And there has been no signs that the stability of the organization helped them at all. I think the coach does deserve some blame for playing a 2-3 zone, for playing lineup combinations that make no sense to close games. And again, we've ad nauseum gone at Pat Riley, gone at the Heat of front office for building a terrible team, and I think that they've done a terrible job of building this team, among the worst in the league. But I do think that Erik Spoelstra, in the context of just looking at the results of the year, being 2 games under 500, that is a disappointment, and the failure to figure out any cohesive plan is also a failure of Erik Spoelstra, in my opinion.
You're listening to the 5 Reasons Sports Network. We've created a menu of intelligent and entertaining content on demand for commutes, workouts, and more. And by now, you're already familiar with the 15 different podcasts in our network. Today, we are proud to announce the premiere of our brand new website, 5reasonsports.com. On it, you'll find columns from more than a dozen of our hosts, many who are professional writers in the market. Watch original videos from shows like Miami Heat Beat and Balls Cast. Browse our full merchandise shop. And unlike other outlets in the area, there's no paywall. Everything is absolutely free. All of this from a network that's credentialed from all 5 major sports teams in South Florida. Oh yeah, did we mention that it's free? We're by Miami for Miami. We're sports on your schedule. We're Miami Sports on Demand. We're the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Go to 5reasonsports.com today.
I don't want to crank up the excuse machine for Spo because he's a no excuses person, right? And that is one of the things that I admire about him. I will say it's not his best work this year. Mm-hmm. I think that's been fairly obvious. I do think there are contributing factors. I'm not gonna call these excuses, but here are some contributing factors. And actually, Chris, I called some of these in training camp. So I remember going to the scrimmage up at FAU, and I remember how many players were in and out during that period of time. And we talk about the continuity, but you had James Johnson, who wasn't healthy last year, was out again at the very beginning. Derrick Jones Jr. got hurt in camp. Dwyane Wade came back extremely fat, okay, and not really available. Josh Richardson was in and out during camp, I think in part, I don't know this for sure, but in part because he was being discussed in trade talks. And that's the other part of this, is that we spent basically not just camp, but like the first month of the season was about a player who wasn't even on the team. Mm-hmm. And I just having been, and again, I've started being around this team a lot more over the past like 2-3 months. Okay. I've gone to a lot more games. And so I was not around them a lot early this year, but I've talked to people who are around the team, and I do think that had an impact too. I think that impacts the coach. I think that you have a situation where it's not just like players in the back end of your roster who might get traded, but like your core guys, okay, may get traded. Like, we were talking about is Justice in the deal? Are they going to move Josh? Okay. Might they move Bam if necessary? Then you're talking about their highest paid players, where we know Whiteside was on the table. We know they were trying to get waiters to anybody who would take him, right? We know that Olynyk was at least considered in terms of giving him away to somebody. So you're talking about like most of the rotation, like other than Dwyane, who they could not trade and would not trade, okay, and Udonis Haslem, pretty much everybody else was discussed. Wayne Ellington, we knew, was probably going to be a cap casualty at some point, or a tax casualty. And again, they didn't use him for 2 months of the season, right? Like, what was that about? Okay. I know he didn't have very good numbers at the beginning of the year in terms of his on-off numbers, but you're talking about a guy who set a 3-point record for you last year. You can't get him on the court anywhere, right? Mm-hmm. Now he's dropping 25 in Detroit. Tyler Johnson, we thought would probably get moved. So I don't think these things are conducive to the coach. I think the other thing, and again, I know I'm going to get labeled with excuses here. I'm just trying to give some explanations for why, as I'm acknowledging, I don't think Spoelstra had his best season. Okay. I think also if you take a look at it in general, I do feel like there have been cross currents in terms of what makes sense for ownership and management and what would make sense for a coach. And this is not an organization that leaks their differences. But, I mean, let's just examine it from afar. You have ownership, which, as you said, is paying a hell of a lot of money for an average team. And so what's the motivation there? And also ownership that's won championships. They know, the Arisons, what a good team looks like. This ain't it. Okay. All right. So what becomes the motivation there? Okay. The motivation is, well, if we're going to be only average, let's figure out how to be average and not pay as much to be average. All right. And so that was the motivation in terms of what are we going to be able to dump in terms of contracts? And we know that it was Tyler Johnson, and ultimately the casualty there was Wayne Ellington. So it has never been, like I said, about winning first this year. It just hasn't. Okay. Because you're dealing with that. All right. Then you have management's issue. All right. And that's Riley, who is aware he has not done his best work, right? Like he was justifying this. Even Windhorst alluded to this, that, they were trying to defend the contracts, and now lately when Riley has done interviews, which has been sparingly and for the most part, except for Family Fest, controlled, because he did it when Jackson, and the thing with Le Batard was more personal than it really was about basketball, or at least about this team. So he's tried to control the message on that stuff. But he has kind of made it known that he's acknowledged that things didn't go all that well, right? When you're talking about dumping contracts, you sign the contracts. So you're dumping what you thought would be good contracts, or at least you would be able to get value for, and you haven't been able to. And so now it's just, okay, how little do we have to part with to get this stuff off our books, these mistakes that I made? So if you're Pat, for a while, I think this season, they were trying to justify contracts, right? We talk about January, all the minutes that James Johnson played, when James Johnson is not an effective player at this stage, okay, not for extended minutes. So all the minutes that he played, forcing Dion back in there when Dion was not in Heat shape. Like, I cannot imagine the Pat Riley that we knew 10 years ago letting Dwyane Wade back on the court this season. Can you?
No. I mean, right? even Hassan from what happened last year, right? I mean, that, like, his public comments towards the end of the year. Now, I've been kind of amazed that he hasn't made any public comments when he takes 5-minute rolls, but you'd imagine he's grumbling behind the scenes. I mean, he's got to know that maybe...
You know what? I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt this time, and I know people say I never do. I mean, what I saw last night was a guy who was engaged. Now, maybe it's just because he got off to a good start. I don't know. But think of all that was working against him last night. You had Bam playing well, right, which is something that I don't know if that always pleases Hassan, right, if you just watch him on the bench. You had Bam playing well. You had foul trouble throughout, which is something that typically distracts Hassan. He's coming off the bench, which we know he doesn't like to do. His minutes have been limited, and he was fucking amazing last night.
Yeah.
Okay? I mean, he just was. And so I don't know if I'm not going to say something's clicked there because, we've been through this 3 million times.
Don't get fooled by it.
I'm not going to get fooled by it, but
the only hope is that it clicks to the tune of opting out.
Right. Well, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if his agency is going to be in favor of that, but or if he will be in favor of that. But look, I don't know if he's bitching behind the scenes. I really don't. I mean, it may come out later because that didn't look to me like a guy who was bitching behind the scenes. It looked to me like a guy who's actually engaged in the process. And I'm not going to buy it long term, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt at least for that. But getting back to the Riley point, so you have to justify Whiteside, right? You have to justify Tyler wasn't Pat. Okay, that was Mickey. But you have to justify Whiteside. You have to justify Waiters. You have to justify James Johnson. We know that Spoelstra was done with Hassan last year, right? Like middle of last year, right? And I mean, think back to the playoffs, right? It's Philadelphia. Like, it's over with, okay? The divorce occurred, right? Just you're still living in the same house. Like, I mean, that's basically what happened here. So you've got ownership, which has one motive, which is not really 100% about winning this year. It has been in past years, for sure, and I give them credit for that, but it's not this year. You have management, which is trying to justify bad decisions, okay? Very proud management, okay? Rightly so. Again, a lot to be proud of, but trying to justify decisions that you can't be prideful about. And so if you're the coach, who the hell do you play? Who do you play?
With
who do
whom?
you play together?
Yeah.
And it's not even like you've been given a roster where, like you said, the pieces make sense. So the pieces don't make sense. There's duplication. You're small in areas you shouldn't be small. You're tall in areas you shouldn't be tall. And you have people above you who have different motivations. Again, understandable. And And
you personally might be more invested in the development of players like Derek Jones Jr., Rodney McGruder.
Because that's what
further adding to it.
Right. And because that's what you like to do. Because what has always gotten Spoelstra excited is development. That's what he likes. Okay. That gets to him. Okay. I wrote a piece 15, 16 with him about Josh Richardson's development. And Eric went on and on and on about this thing about Richardson going in the gym by himself and Eric showing up in the gym and forcing him to shoot 300 times. This is what he likes to do. This is a head coach who gets on the court in practice and runs the drills himself. Okay. He's a gym rat. That's what he is. So you've got that, and you want to play the kids, and he's also a youthful coach, even though he's gotten, he's almost 50 at this stage, but he's a youthful coach in terms of the way he approaches things still. And so I just can't imagine this has been an easy season for him. I just can't. And so we're going to say all of that, and people are going to say two things about me here. They're going to say, one, I'm making excuses for him. I'm not. It has not been a great year. Okay? Just putting that out there. And two, they're going to say I'm speaking for him, and I just want to make it very clear. I'm not. I have had no conversations with him at all. Okay. Period. Okay. So it's neither of those things. I'm just watching this, and that's what I see. And I have known him for a long time. I mean, I started covering the team in 96, which is the same year he was there. So I've seen him in all these different roles. And to me, he hasn't looked happy a lot this year compared to past years. So I think that's where we are, Chris. I just think this whole thing it's just been exhausting for people. I talked to somebody, I'm not going to give it away, but I talked to somebody again inside the organization yesterday who's not on the personnel, side. Okay. And he's not in the PR side. Guys, don't get all freaked out about that. He's not on any of that. Okay. It's somebody else on another side of the building. Okay. Who reports to somebody else. And I was talking to this person. They're like, this just needs to be over. It's just over. We need a new group. Group.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's one thing to have the big three together for 4 years and everybody to get sick of each other in 13-14, right? Like sick of each other. And then okay, we got rid of guys we liked in Mike Miller and Joel Anthony, and you gave us Michael Beasley and Greg Oden and Tony Douglas. Okay, this is over. This has been fun, but this is over. Okay. At least there were championships. There were parades. There were, there were...
Even as we're sick of each other, we're getting to the finals.
Right. We hate each other. They never hated each other. The players never did. Okay, it was never like that. But it was like that. But they were tired of each other. And they were tired of Pat, and they were tired of the whole thing, and they were tired of the pressure, and they were tired. But, it's one thing to keep a team together, for the most part, for a 4-year period. That's a team like that. It's another thing to be into year 3 of this, right? Where it's at least with that, you're like, okay, if we just get another Ray Allen or Shane Battier to join us, we're in business again, right? But this is not. This is like when Marlins fans talk about we were, 2 pitchers away, right? This Heat team is not 2 pitchers away, right? It's a bunch of B- players, which is why Dwyane Wade, who would acknowledge, okay, that at this stage of his career, he's a B- player as opposed to being an AA+ player like he was for so many years, that he can still be the best player on the team a lot of nights.
Yeah.
Because there's nobody else to compare.
And the player they're turned into in the fourth quarter. That's something that we didn't talk about. Maybe we can get to in kind of a post-mortem. But, they've been dreadful in fourth quarters trying to close out some of these games. And you just look around and go, who has the ball in his hands late in games? And it's Winslow, and that's not especially great, and then not a ton of other options. But the one thing that I think we should close with is, does any of that change if they win 4 in a row and get in the playoffs?
Oh, yeah, I'll take this whole pod back. We're gonna delete it. We're gonna delete it. Could they? Yeah, but you and I have both watched enough teams to know when something like that's gonna happen, right?
Mm-hmm. Right, and in general, where the tailwinds are. To me, the other thing, and I was watching Magic Knicks last night, and I understand it could be hard to get up for the Knicks when they're the worst team in the league and they're tanking, but that Orlando arena looked dead last night. There was no interest, and you were at the game, and Heat crowds are generally very good, but. To me, the whole thing about we have to have 16 playoff teams, 8 in each conference, because we want to keep as many fan bases engaged. Are Heat fans engaged by this? They're watching the games, and theoretically there's stakes attached to them. But, is this engaging the fan base? Is engaging fan bases into thinking that making the playoffs is an achievement when really the understanding is we're nowhere near good enough to win the championship? Is that really that important of a business, incentive for the NBA to continue with 8 playoff places? Because I don't know, man, I'm watching Orlando and I'm watching Miami and I'm watching some of these other teams, and they look kind of bored with it, even as they're in a playoff chase, which should be fun and exciting. This isn't any kind of fun and exciting.
You're going to get me in trouble because I got Heat fans angry at me last night because, I'm sitting there halfway through the first quarter and the place is a third empty.
Yeah.
And it did fill in. I do want to say that it did fill in, and it got pretty loud there at times last night. And I know the traffic is terrible. I live here too. I understand it. You don't have to tell me. I've lived in South Florida since 1985. Okay, it's spring break week. We're roughly close to it. I understand. Okay, I get it. All right, that it takes a while to get there. I also understand that everybody needs to eat the first minute that they get there, which is why everybody's at the concessions for the first 6 minutes, and the concessions at the arena tend to take a long time at that particular arena. So I owe that better than it used to be. So I get it. Okay, but did that feel like a playoff crowd last night? No, and it was a fairly competitive game. Like it was. Yeah. It was close enough at times because of the way that the Heat's bigs played that, it could have gone either direction. And but the thing that got me about it, and what got me kind of annoyed about it, and why I did push back on the Heat fans who, oh, you getting on us again, whatever, is that Dwyane Wade's only played one home game after this in the regular season. And we loved Wade. We'll show up in the second quarter after we stop for some chicken teriyaki at the little food stand.
Yeah, for me, the other one too is, oh no, we can't hold the ceremony to commemorate Wade's retirement before the game because we're afraid nobody's going to be there. We can't hold the Wade ceremony after the game or the boss ceremony after the game because then everyone's going to get up and leave. So there's like because you're not in your seats, at the 4-minute mark of the first quarter. So there's basically like a 1 hour and 48-minute period in which I can get your attention. Like, that's insane. Like, what are you talking about? You can't have the ceremony before the game because there's going to be empty seats. Like, figure out a way if you really are invested in this. And you're right. That was the second to last Wade home game. We've got one left. If you're invested in this and people are buying up tickets because they want to be there for this, then take your ass to the arena a half hour early. Like, figure out a way to, maybe eat at halftime or figure out a way to eat and get to the arena and get off work faster. Like, understand that's easier to say than to do. But, I mean, some of the excuses are a bit much for me.
So, anyway, look, Justice Winslow was asked last night about, where they go from here. And he said, how many do we have left? 4? We win 4. So we're going to see what this Heat team has. And look, I've already lost my over-under. I went over 42.5, so I'm already screwed. Like, there's no financial.
I lost that one as well. I actually want them to make the playoffs because I have them to win the Southeast Division.
I know you do.
And all I need them to do is make the playoffs to win the Southeast Division, and I'm there. But yeah, I mean, I'm not holding out hope at this point.
No, so look, but I will say this: if they win 4 straight here, how are we going to mea culpa on this? Because we have been, we've bounced around on this team all year. Like, we've been really negative. Then I've had a couple of sort of glimmer of hope podcasts. And now here we are, and we're super negative again with 4 games left. So what do? Do we issue a public apology on our site?
We're gonna get killed. We're gonna get killed. Oh, you guys are being negative again. And it's like, they're 2 games under 500, and they're paying $150 million for their team. Even if they finish 2 games above 500, I mean, a 42-40 season with a first round exit, like, that doesn't change much. But I mean, I guess it sort of depends on how they do it. But I don't think they're going to win 4 in a row. I think max 3, and 41-41 is going to have to do it. And I'm not mea culpaing when I was making fun of Heat fans for being excited about a 43-39 season, and we've already signaled, and shout out to Cinco Razones for wanting that to happen. But we're already underneath that threshold, which for me was the mocking threshold. So no, I'm not mea culpaing if they take Milwaukee to 7. Then I'll mea culpa, but until then, I'm not going to.
So what does Dwyane do in the last game if they're already eliminated?
I think he'll play. I mean, I just think
he plays in Brooklyn. I don't think he should.
Yeah, but I get your reasoning, but I do think that it'll be kind of like the Kobe game, where that final game against, was it Denver, and he scored 60 and took 1,000 shots. Like, he will be a feature game. Like, TNT wanted to do the Heat Sixers game, that final game, but they couldn't work out a timing arrangement. I think that game will be like the ESPN2 game on the final day of the season, kind of like they did for the Kobe game, because it's the last Dwyane game, and I think it would be anticlimactic if he didn't play. I think he'll be the biggest story on the final day of the season because these playoff chases aren't any kind of interesting. And if the Heat are in the playoff chase, that only makes it that much more interesting. But yeah, I think he'll play on the final day even if they're out.
I don't think he should. And that's I'm hedging on whether to book a ticket up to Brooklyn, one way or the other. I don't know. I gotta see if JetBlue will accommodate on this.
Is it expensive?
It's not cheap. I mean, it's the accommodations I can handle, but it's the getting up there right there at the last minute. But I just think he should end in Miami. he doesn't have any ties to that arena. I don't, it's Brooklyn. It's not.
I mean, it will be a Heat home crowd if because it's Dwyane's
no,
last game.
Well,
there will be 10,000 Heat fans there.
No, that's accurate. But yeah, I if he scores 24 in his final game against Philadelphia at home, just like take the night off, man. Like you've done, that's what I would do. But it doesn't sound to me. I talked to a bunch of people about it last night who know him, and they're like, he's going to play. So I don't think he, I mean, he can do whatever he wants, but to me, it should end here. If it's going to end, and we'll see. I do think the one positive here is I don't think he's going to be Marino'd at the end, right? So this season has been so much better than Dan's last year for a lot of reasons.
Well, I mean, the Dolphins did make the playoffs in Dan's last year.
They did,
and they got humiliated out of it.
Humiliated like no team has ever been humiliated in playoffs before or since. 62-7, and Jay Fiedler, mopped up on their ass at the end. It's not going to be as bad. I mean, if the Heat make the playoffs, I don't think like they're going to be embarrassed by Milwaukee 4 straight games. I guess they could be, but I think they'll be competitive because they play hard at least. Whereas that Dolphin team, I remember covering that Dolphin team, it had kind of given up at that point. Was tired of Jimmy. Jimmy was tired of them, and all the rest. But we'll see how it goes. I do think he should end at home. I guess the only other question is, do you start him in the last game at home to let him be introduced last, or
in the press release for the last game there was like a D-Wade centric player introductions? So I don't know what that means, but maybe he gets a start in that last game just to say that they did it. And
plus, if he starts, then Dion doesn't get a chance to take 11 threes by the 5-minute mark. So
by the under 6 timeout,
they're never going to fight us back again.
Thank you for listening to the Fire Ringer podcast. Thank you so much.